Okay, so back again. Today I want to talk about ideologies. So in today's world, we see a lot of division in terms of our ideologies and the impact that we can have on each other is a lot greater with social media, social networks, and I think that we all have to remind ourselves that what we say can have an impact. And that impact can be good or it can be bad. I think that's pretty simple. However, we have to understand things in terms of motives. So every time you hear about a new ideology, you have to think about the source of where it's coming from. Now, a lot of people are aware of this sort of conundrum in terms of newspapers or news outlets in general, and the way they lean and their agenda in terms of that, and in terms of what they want. But I think that also, what we have to understand in sort of a metaphysical sense is our standing with each fellow human in terms of our relationships with each other. I think that it's important that just because we can have ideologies that are fundamentally opposed to each other, that it doesn't mean that we can't find a middle ground between ourselves as people. We are not ideologies. We are not collectivism. We are not individualism. We are not socialism. We're not capitalism. We're not communism. And what's hard about this is that people want an identity. Whenever they have this identity of capitalist, socialist, or whatever it may be, they, in the end, want to prove their identity to be right. In essence, their ideology, right? Now, where this can be used as a weapon is whenever one side can try to influence the other side by creating divisions between those people to the point where those people will go against their own system. This is psychological warfare, and it's something that's been happening since, hundreds of years. But in today's world, we see this in terms of propaganda from China and Russia and the United States mainly, main superpowers. And we have to realize, we have to understand more so, that these divisions are not good for anyone. It's not good to fight between gender or race or even like what school you went to, what social class you're in. And the more that you separate people and you create these boundaries, you start creating these boxes, these segments, this segmentation of people. This happens in marketing. Segmentation is a really basic marketing 101 type thing. However, people can use this for manipulation. So there's companies like Cambridge Analytica that was in the news a couple years ago, I think a couple years ago, where they're using this segmented data on people to manipulate them and manipulate their thoughts. And this is really a tricky subject because what it may seem like to some people is attacking someone's ideology, but ultimately what it comes down to is allowing them to break free from any ideology, to create their own identity coming from their own intellect, their own wisdom, their own experience. And it's hard to live in a world where people are disconnected. It's hard to live in a world where people don't want to talk to each other, where they feel scared of each other, where they hate each other, anger. And these social media platforms really lean towards anger, which is based upon fear. So you see this right wing and left wing stuff, but we're all Americans in the end. Not all of us watching, obviously, but for my example, I live in America, United States of America, and in the Constitution it says "we the people," and that's so important. It's probably some of the most important words to ever be written in law or in our government. And it means that we, not me, not you, but we, together. And what's happening in today's world, all over the world, or in today's society, but also all around the world, is this division. And sometimes we have to take a step back and realize that someone that we might be disagreeing with is not our enemy, is not attacking us. There's this paper that I'll link in the description called The Matrix and the Intruder. Came out a couple months ago, I think in Sci Articles. But anyways, it talks about the Matrix as life events, series of life events that happen. So when you first enter the world, you are a intruder, as the article says. The intruder upon your mother's womb. Then once you're born, you're an intruder upon the matrix of the world and the family that you're in. A lot of people that have kids will say that it's like, you can't really connect with a baby, per se. It's not like you know their thoughts on matters and stuff. Their personality hasn't developed. That's what I mean by that. And in the end, like a baby that's like a month old just, poops and screams and, and that's about it. But then after that, the intruder, which is the baby now, will become a kid, a teenager, a young adult, and then an adult. And once they get to this level, they're fully integrated within the matrix of the world around them. They have left the family that they were born into, become independent, and walked into this new matrix. This new matrix of the world is very scary. And when you don't have a good bearing of what tribe or what group or what club or organization or what side you stand on, this matrix that we all live in is terrifying. If you look at the world as the world can be extremely overwhelming, especially now when we live with the world just in our pockets and our phones. We can see all the different groups of people, and we always segment ourselves in hierarchies of competition, of men competing with men, women competing against women, and not that is wrong per se, but when we don't know which group we're in to be able to compete within, we start seeing the whole world as our competition. So whenever you go into the world, a lot of people will go into a career and job, and that's their little matrix, a little system of things of which they can thrive in. But in this world where we move jobs every 2 years and friends and are constantly changing, and the whole social media thing is that we see all different groups of people. So we can't really identify with one group unless we really try hard to, isolate ourselves into one group. And so it leads us to comparing ourselves. there's a big thing about relativity in hierarchies. So someone who is, poor in America would be like a king in poor sub-Saharan African countries or whatever, like third world countries. But because they're at the bottom, they're poor in America, they're going to feel worse than the people that are at the top in the, third world country that are doing just about the same. They're going to feel a lot better. So, not always, obviously, it's not like an absolute, but generally, they'll be more successful than the community around them. But whenever you're on social media here in America, or first world countries, you see the ultra rich, you see the pages of like Billionaires Club and stuff. You can't help but compare yourself to that. It's part of our human nature to compare ourselves, to see where we're at and how well we're doing, and to see if we need to be better. And that is so unfair if not kept in check. So this matrix of the world that has globalized is a big mess right now. No one knows where they fit in. You have to be super, super razor focused on your purpose and identity to be able to stay sane in this insane world right now. And that's very hard. So whenever we leave the family, which some of us didn't come from a cohesive matrix of a family or familial matrix. So we enter this adult, independent, scary, terrifying world with no coping, no tribe to lean on, no group to rely on. And this affects more so lower socioeconomic groups because of their lack of opportunity to join groups. That's why like gangs and stuff are pretty popular. No, that's not the right word to use. Gangs can be appealing, is what I mean, to people in lower socioeconomic situations because it's not really based on how much they make. It's about proving themselves, and that isn't through like physical means or whatever. I mean, you guys know, like the initiations and everything. And yeah, so whenever you go into this matrix of the world, you don't know where to go. Now the next matrix after that would be creating your own family. That means that you're going from being independent and caring only about yourself and your well-being for the most part, exempting relationships, which are the start of the family, per se. You are starting to support a new matrix in a family. And that's a big change for people. And that's also another scary thing. Because once you're so used to the chaos of one matrix, which might be the independent world, moving into a new matrix of the family is extra terrifying. You have no idea what's going to happen. Especially in this world where we don't really advertise the positives of families, of the, nuclear family, I guess you could say. And so people are less tempted to make these families. And families are kind of the cornerstone of society. Whenever we're talking about we the people, we should always have an inner matrix that we can say we about, like our family. Whenever we say we and we don't have a family, we might have friends, but friends kind of come and go. That's just kind of how life works. So, these divisions in our society, you have to realize at what points in matrices are people trying to target in psychological warfare. So whenever people try to target young people, they're trying to influence how they act into adulthood. And people trying to target adults They're trying to affect how they will enter families. And they'll use tricks like empathy, which is really hard to say no to because everyone likes empathy or empathetic people. It's an agreeable trait. But you have to remember the source and where the sources affects. You have to realize what the source is doing and the effects of what that cause will have. And yeah, these ideologies can split us apart before we even have our own matrix. And once that's done, everyone's divided because you're divided internally and you don't know what's safe and what's not. They used to have this thing where people doing business together, men doing business together, wouldn't do business if the other guy didn't have a wife. It showed that they couldn't be trusted. And this breakdown of interpersonal relationships in today's society is kind of doing that on just a more individual to individual level or interpersonal. And you no longer have that basis of trust. This is very, very bad. Trust is very important in a country. When you don't trust your community, when you don't trust your local government, when you don't trust your state government, when you don't trust your federal government, in America's case, you will start to hate everything. You will become angry and aggressive. Because in that matrix environment, nothing is familiar. Everything is unknown. You can't control anything. Taking a first step towards anything in purpose or in joining a group is terrifying. And judgment feels like it's everywhere. Because you're not part of a group or anything. You can't have a group to rely on. And we need that as social beings, as social creatures, we humans. And so I just want to emphasize this point of avoiding ideologies dividing us. Let's remember that we are all people. We all have fears. We all are trying to do the best in our situation. And sometimes we have things that hold ourselves back, that get misinterpreted. Sometimes we join groups that aren't aligned with who we are. Sometimes the matrix that we're in is terrifying. And we might not have a purpose. We might not have an identity. And that doesn't mean, though, that we aren't all similar in some way. We all can connect in some way. We are all human. We are the people. I want you to sit on that idea. We, the people, ideologies, division, and unity of spirit. And I will leave it at that. Thanks for watching.